Just a quick note, I will say, I'm not in my normal setting here. This is actually the second time in the course of the pandemic that we decided to bring the CEPA team together, fly people in from across the country to be together in person. And we rented out this amazing indoor-outdoor facility in downtown DC. And when we called and said, our meeting planner called and said, our CEO has this really important webinar to do. Do you have this private space where it's going to be quiet that she can do this from? They said, sure. And I showed up, and it literally is a speakeasy with a hidden door. You have to find the hidden door to get into it. So this is a first for me. I am moderating a webinar from within a hidden speakeasy. So very exciting. But anyway, so apologize for any background noise, lighting issues, but I'm going with it. But I'm very excited about today's conversation. For those who briefly aren't familiar with the organization I run, the Smart Electric Power Alliance, we are a nonprofit that is focused on working across the electric power sector to ensure that this energy transition is in fact a smart one, ensuring that we are really balancing safe, affordable, reliable, clean, and equitable as we go through this really critical transition to get us to a carbon-free energy system. And as part of that work that we do, one of our flagship efforts over the past year has been something we've been calling the Utility Transformation Challenge. So we surveyed the US utility industry, specifically electric distribution utilities, to understand where they are in their progress towards a clean and modern grid across a whole variety of factors, and really looking at it, again, very holistically in terms of not only how much clean energy is in their portfolio, the resource mix that they're delivering to customers, but also what are the things that they have done foundationally in the utility in order to enable acceleration of that transition. And as a result of that surveying effort, we had the utilities that participated in that represent 63% of all US electric customers, so more than a majority of the electric utility representation in the country. And as part of that, we essentially scored the survey responses we got from the utilities, and we determined a leaderboard, and really excited that the 10 utilities who are on our leaderboard, who we determined per this assessment, are farthest along in the transition. A lot of really interesting things amongst those 10. Interestingly, 5 of them are investor-owned utilities, 5 of them are public power, 5 of them are in California, 5 of them are in other parts of the country. And my favorite stat is 5 of them are led by female CEOs and 5 of them are led by male CEOs, which really I think is meaningful, right? Because clearly, I think as a utility industry, we've made a lot of progress on diversity, in particular gender diversity. And I think relative to other industries, actually, we have very strong female leadership, but clearly not 50% of all utility CEOs are females. So the fact that 50% of the leaderboard utilities are female, I think is actually a really important and distinguishing fact. So I'm excited to have this conversation with 3 female CEOs from 3 of the 5 leaderboard utilities that are led by women. And what I'd like to do is just ask each of you briefly to get us started, to briefly introduce yourself, but really help lay the groundwork for folks who are listening to understand where your utility is. What is your carbon reduction target? What are your interim milestones? What are some of the key sort of foundational things that everyone should understand about your utility's carbon reduction journey as we dive into this conversation? So why don't we start, Mary, with you on the East Coast, and then we'll work our way, both other on the West Coast, but we'll start with you, Mary, on the East Coast.
Great, thank you, Julianne. It's a pleasure to be here. I actually joined the panel just to be able to steal ideas from Patty and Deborah, so I hope that's okay. No, but seriously, I'll say at the outset that that stat is so wonderful to hear about. That half of that list is run by, led by women CEOs. I mean, that's not something that I'm not sure we could say about other years. So it's wonderful, and it really does give me a sense of hope as we look out over the next 5 to 10 years of what we need to accomplish as an industry. It gives me a sense of it just gives me a sense of hope to have people like Patty and Deborah and others really leading in this space. So, so my name is Mary Mcclure. I lead Green Mountain Power, which is in the brave little state of Vermont. We are small, but we are mighty. We like to say there's maybe 650,000 people in the whole state, and GMP serves about 70% of all Vermonters. Unlike other parts of New England, we are Vermont is still vertically integrated. So Green Mountain Power not only is responsible for transmitting and distributing the power to Vermonters, but we're also responsible for making it or buying the power on behalf of Vermonters. So that makes Vermont and our challenges in New England a little unique compared to some of the other states. For as long as I've been at Green Mountain, which is now about 12 years, I think I've been CEO for just under 2. I got the job about 5 weeks before the pandemic started, but I had been here about a decade before that. We've been using this phrase, which at this point it's probably overused, but it gives you a good sense of what we've been up to over the last decade. We use energy as a force for good. And that's been really driving decisions we've made in the past decade, and it'll drive the decisions we're making over the next, which are a little different and a little more unique than they were when we got started in this work. So our goals have really been around the customer-led revolution that's taking place in the cleaner energy industry in the face of climate change, and customers really wanting, particularly in Vermont, really more control over their energy needs. And they want to know that their energy, that when they flip on the light or they plug in their car, is clean. That's what they want. They want to know that, and they want to have some more control and more empowerment as they think about their energy needs into the future. So our goals have had to adjust over the last decade, and they're going to have to adjust over the next based off what it is our customers want. So our foundational goal right now is to be 100% renewable by 2030 and to be 100% carbon free by 2025. And we're about 64% or so renewable right now. We feel that we're going to be very well positioned to be 100% renewable by 2030, but there's a lot of hard work that's going to need to get done between now and then to do it. And part of the foundation here will be around connecting the renewable resources together that we're seeing more of on our system and that we're encouraging more of on our system in Vermont. So we like to think of it as, we use the term closer, but basically what that means is electricity is moving from what was once a very centralized system with a one-way transmission and distribution of that system to a customer to now a much more distributed grid with a two-way system where energy in customers' homes is both flowing to and from. So that plus connecting those resources together is what we really see as Green Mountain Power's role in enabling this energy future where we use energy as a force for good. So in a sense, GMP is becoming more of like a conductor of an orchestra, conductor of an energy orchestra that's happening out on our grid, much more so than it ever has been in the past. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks. I definitely want to come back to that.
Okay.
A little bit details about how you're conducting the orchestra and what that looks like, but we'll get to that. So let's stay in the northern part of the country, but go all the way to the other coast. And Deborah, let's head out to you in Seattle. You're muted, Deborah.
Thanks so much for having me. And let me apologize up front. I'm a bit distracted. And Patty, I don't know, how did you fare last night? We've had a good bit of blow here in the Northwest and rain, but we did definitely have one of those. I got rid of my blur so you could see I live in downtown Seattle, and literally yesterday afternoon was working and watch, because I, like many of us know, I don't get to work in a speakeasy, although that sounds really fun, Julia. I get to work at my kitchen table most of the time. And so I was doing that, and it was literally one of those squalls that just came up and in a very short period of time, knocked a whole lot of stuff down. So working through that this morning while the mayor is having a press conference at 11 that we're trying to prep her for. So I'm like, anyway, it is always a pleasure to come and talk about SEPA's program, the Utility Transformation Program. We were honored to be on the leaderboard. And it is funny because, Julia, I think you can relate to this, but it feels like people really want, I'm doing recording another thing for a podcast, and people want to know the rank. You know, there's just something about us that it's not enough to be on the leaderboard. It's like, what?
I know. Well, we didn't do it. At least this was our first year of the effort. We weren't ready quite. Maybe we'll get there.
I don't know. I kind of like the idea, and I actually think that's really relevant to where we are right now in our industry. In fact, when we think about across the United States, I've had an opportunity to do some work with the American Public Power Association, who has been working on, a climate policy. And then we transitioned and we were looking at a clean energy standard, because many of us thought that's where the Biden administration would go in their efforts to curb carbon. And then out of seemingly nowhere, all of a sudden we were looking at this clean energy performance plan, which was very different. And I think that for me, what it did was recognize that, and I'm coming back to the leaderboard, we all start from a different place, and utilities can and should be acknowledged. If we choose as a country to go to a system of financial rewards, then rewarded for progress and movement, because we all start from a different place. And so ranking folks on a leaderboard, I think, has the potential to take away that incentive to move from wherever we are. And, so I'm the CEO and general manager of Seattle City Light, which is one of the larger public utilities in the country. But when I compare myself to people like Patty, I'm a little tiny utility here. I'm a speck in the great Northwest, but we are extremely fortunate because we in the Northwest, many of us, particularly in Oregon, Washington, we have really we have been blessed with our hydro resource. And it is interesting right now to think about. I was writing some notes down, and I thought, I wonder if there'll be a time when we look back on hydrogen, because I had a breakfast meeting this morning with another powerful woman in our industry, and she asked me my thoughts on hydrogen. And I thought it will be interesting to see if hydropower becomes the old hydrogen at some point 50 years from now, and we're looking back and it is a completely different world. And when we talk about hydro, it would mean hydrogen instead of hydropower. So really interesting. But we are fortunate because we do benefit from clean, carbon-free resource that is home to the Pacific Northwest. And as a public utility who we get probably about 30 to 40% of our load met through a block contract with the Bonneville Power Administration, which is a power marketing agency of the Department of Energy, and they market the power that's produced in the Federal Columbia River power system. So we start with a home court advantage, if you will. And I think right now we are, ostensibly probably 95% carbon free. And it's probably higher than that, but we have, I think others, and Patty is well aware, there's a tagging issue where we need to get better at our greenhouse gas accounting and our ability to tag these pesky megawatt hours as they flow through the system. And so we truly know where they come from. City Light has been greenhouse gas neutral since 2005. And it's funny because for a while, when I came to the utility, this was still true. We had a tagline, which was the nation's greenest utility. And as soon as CETA was passed in 2019, and CETA stands for the Clean Energy Transformation Act, and it is a really kind of, it's a piece of legislation that again was passed in Washington State, but it is, it's being looked at. A lot of other folks look at it because it has aggressive timelines for decarbonizing all of Washington State, but it also has effective off ramps around both cost and reliability. So as we look at how to continue decarbonization across the country, CETA brings a lot of positive, and we are in the rulemaking process for that right now. But what CETA does is, so I was saying, we used to call ourselves the nation's greenest utility because we were the first utility that we knew of who was greening any carbon with true offsets, and that's different than RECs. I like to remind folks, offsets mean we actually went out, and we still do, invest in projects that would otherwise potentially not get off the ground were it not for investment. So it is really something that we're proud of because it means that we're out there trying to make the market. But once CETA was passed, I said, we cannot call ourselves that anymore because in Washington State, by 2025, there'll be no coal for Washington State customers, and that is a bit of a lift for some of our investor-owned utilities. By 2030, all utilities will be greenhouse gas neutrals, which is why I said we're going to need to come up with a different way to define ourselves. And by 2045, Washington State utilities will be 100% renewables and or carbon-free resources. So when I think about City Light's goals, we're so far along the way. So I think of us as really having an incredible opportunity to help and help create the environment where we can continue to decarbonize in the Northwest, but truly where we can decarbonize more aggressively across the West. And that's work that Patty and I are fortunately getting to work on together in some ways. And also just to do our part to help move this country towards those goals. And I do think from the work that I did with APPA, and then I'll stop, we have to think about it. Those of us who started from a different place, we have a responsibility and an obligation, I think, to help those of us who are have a much heavier lift in order to move our country's goals forward. So I'm trying to stay more focused on the Northwest, the West, and even the United States than on City Light, because we, again, are blessed to start with, but we have serious work to do as an industry and as a country.
Deborah, thank you so much. That was so helpful. And thank you for your leadership. I mean, so clearly you are stepping outside. You have your day-to-day job of running the utility, but just hearing you talk about the obligation you feel to help the rest of the region and the help of the country, just I think is such a testament to your leadership. So thank you. Patty, moving down the coast, down the West Coast to the Bay Area, give us a snapshot of what's going on in PG&E.
Well, first of all, thank you, Julia, for hosting as always, and SEPA. It's such a pleasure to really be with all of you. You know, I am definitely feel honored to lead the team that continues to be recognized as a leader and on the leaderboard with companies like Green Mountain Power and Seattle City Light. You know, as far as the ranking goes, Deborah, I'll just say this. You and Mary are both number one on my list. If I had to do the ranking, I'd put you both up there, tied for number one. Just honored to be with you both today. And Deborah, I hope your teams are able to stay safe. You know, these restoration efforts really test the best of us. And, you know, I was super impressed, frankly, and amazed by my own team overnight, able to restore 400,000 customers in the last 30 hours. I was reminded of our scale today, like, oh my goodness, that is really something, and with no safety incidents. So very, very, I know how hard it is, no matter what our scope and scale is, Deborah, to deal with significant weather like this. And I know, Mary, you get it too out in Vermont. But, you know, at PG&E, we are definitely in a transformation, which I think everyone recognizes, and frankly, on a journey of redemption. We must reestablish trust and confidence with our customers, the people that we are privileged to serve. And with that in mind, my new leadership team that has all come on board in concert with the team who was here throughout this year, we have taken a stand that we are delivering for our hometowns, we're serving our planet, and we are leading with love. And that's a big order for PG&E, but I know we're up for it. And so I am definitely proud to be part of the PG&E family who has long advocated for national and international action to thwart climate change and to better serve our planet, including certainly our support for California's ambitious goal to reach carbon neutrality by 2045 economy-wide. My team and I are exploring right now our true ambition as it relates to the planet. And as a newer California resident, I have a new appreciation for the sense of urgency and am living the true effects of climate change. And I am filled with desire to heal our planet faster. And whatever we can do faster is on all of our minds. And so we're actually kind of reevaluating our goals as we speak. But that being said, we're certainly proud to say that we continue to deliver some of the nation's cleanest energy. In 2020, about 85% was greenhouse gas free. I'm very impressed with Deborah and Mary's statistics and ambitious to catch up with them on the renewable front. We do have a large hydro and a nuclear plant in our fleet. So that's what enables 85% greenhouse gas free. But we only have 35% of our energy delivered through renewables today. And so we look forward to meeting the state's ambition of 60% renewable energy by 2030. And then we'll supply 100% of sales from renewables or zero carbon resources by 2045. And when I think about the scope and scale of the PG&E system, when we are doing that, that will definitely have a huge impact on the triple bottom line that we strive to serve, serving people, the planet, and California's prosperity. So we got a lot of work to do at PG&E, but I know the team is up for it.
Great. Thank you all for those sort of level setting comments to help us understand where each of you are. You know, I had my whole list of questions that I sent each of you in advance, but man, we got so many great questions from the attendees when they were registering. They put questions in advance, and also people have already been putting questions in the Q&A box. So I'm going to sort of ditch my list of questions for the most part and really just respond to what I'm seeing in terms of the greatest interest from the audience. And I'd like to go back to starting, Mary, picking up on what you said about, you know, your utility really becoming the conductor of the orchestra, this new role you're playing. I think that ties nicely to a theme I'm seeing in the questions of people asking about the role of DER, in particular DER aggregation, the role of demand flexibility. What does that mean for the utility? So let's start there. I'd love to hear from each of you about how your utilities are thinking about this sort of whole new aspect of the business that has been, you know, sort of in existence for a couple of decades, but really only becoming meaningful now. And Mary, why don't we start with you, since you're the one that mentioned that at the beginning?
Sure. So I'll start with a bold statement that we say sometimes to get us innovating and thinking here at GMP, but we talk about solar on every roof, battery in every home. Again, we're a mighty little tiny state. So Patty just described how many outages she had. It's like double how many customers we have, and it's almost the size of our state. But we feel uniquely positioned in a place like Vermont to be able to say something like that and actually work very hard over the next several years to achieve it. The reason we say that is because it helps us move quickly to understanding the issues that exist that we need to tackle and provide solutions for when there's more generation on your distribution system. So that's something we have it. We have net metering. We have programs that we've gotten off the ground over the last decade. But envision a world where Vermonters have solar on their roof and a storage, maybe the battery is even their meter. How do we really unlock the value of that type of system? And that's where we see ourselves being able to play a very critical role, not only in ensuring that our grid, the greater grid, we like to call it, is supported and flexible and dynamic. And that's our responsibility and always going to be. But also that we're enabling distributed energy resources wherever they are in our system and think in terms of literally solar on every roof, battery in every home, in order for that system to be unlocked in a way that it's allowing decarbonization of other industries. In Vermont, transportation and heating are the two largest industries contributing to greenhouse gas. To be able to enable that world where there's more connected and keep costs down across the grid, we have got to be able to connect it all together. And a utility like Green Mountain Power able to dispatch it, control it in a way that leverages the system for everybody. So we do that now with our current home battery storage program that we launched about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I've lost track of time. An incredibly successful program. We want to grow it bigger in Vermont. It went from a pilot to a tariff and actually a part of our core services now. But you think of a program like that paired with storage and then paired with solar or other distributed energy resources, including community solar, and rolling that out for customers who might not have the roof that enables solar or is that you might want solar on for purposes of the capacity. But we really see our job now as enabling that. And that's really what Vermonters are wanting for and asking for, particularly as they decarbonize their other parts of their lives, whether it's heating and cooling in their homes or their cars. And so that's when I think of us as a conductor of an orchestra, what I think of is our ability to tap into those resources for the greater grid when we need to, whether it is because of result of a major weather event, unpredicted weather that we're going to be seeing in increased ways over the next decade, or because it's a peak demand event and we need to balance out the system. So that's kind of the summary of how I see our role really transitioning from where we were to where we're going. And to Patty's point and Deborah's, we've got to do it faster.
So Mary, I'm going to, before we go to Patty and Deborah to hear what they have to say, I do want to pick up on another question we had from the audience that I think is a nice add-on to what you said. So what's your vision for what that means for the utility business model, right? If you've got, what is the, sort of business model? What has it changed, the regulatory construct? What is it that the utility is getting compensated for and how in this future vision where every customer has solar on their roof and battery in their garage?
Yep. Well, we're already doing it now in Vermont. So you could just look at our current business model if you wanted to see how it could work for a place like us. We're revenue decoupled. So kilowatt hours, and to me, that just makes a lot of sense, particularly when we are transitioning other industries to electrify. For us, what's most important is that we're investing in the right parts of the grid, and we're investing in distributed energy resources, and we're offering programs and services that lower rates for other customers. So for example, our Powerwall program saved about $3 million last year alone when we were able to tap into those batteries at peak times. So those are when you think about, for us, we don't think in terms of, we need to make money off more kilowatt hour sales. We haven't thought like that for a long time. It doesn't motivate us at GMP to do that. We want to see more electrification because it's cleaner, and we actually think it's as you bring generation closer to load, you want to have that you want customers to electrify because it's the cleaner thing to do and the right thing to do, not because it makes us money. So that was a cultural shift that happened for us years ago, and like I said, we're decoupled. Which is a very utility wonky term, but if you Google it, you can read about what that means in the regulatory sense. But we're really driven more by empowering our customers so that they can have access to products and services they want, and make sure we're investing in the right parts of the grid. And that's where our utility model has shifted.
Yeah, great. And Mary, you're so good at sort of foreshadowing the questions I'm going to ask later, because I'm going to come back to culture. That's an important piece of this conversation. But Patty, let's go to you. You're new, personally new to California, but these issues are not new to California. California's been on the forefront. PG&E's been at the forefront. So where do you see things going in your state in terms of not only DER, but DER aggregation, demand flexibility? You know, how is this going to be a larger part of the future?
It's so interesting. I'll start with a few numbers up front just to say like where we are, but then I want to tap onto everything Mary was just talking about. Just a few numbers that might surprise you, because they surprised me when I got here. We've connected more than 580,000 solar customers to the grid, more than 29,000 storage customers to the grid. For solar, we connect about 5,000 new solar customers to the grid each month, usually in about 3 business days. And we also have about 360,000 electric vehicles registered in our service area, which is 1 in 5 of all electric vehicles are in the PG&E service area. So when I hear Mary talk about needing a conductor of the energy orchestra, amen, sister, you are singing my song. I do believe that's a very important role for the utility to play, and that we can be an energy force for good. Like, I mean, I love that whole notion. And what's, I think, unique for PG&E right now is, and certainly has captured our imaginations, is the intersection of wildfire mitigation and thwarting climate change as fast as possible. That's a unique vantage point for us. One day I was driving up in Northern California through one of the major fire burn scar areas, and I could see these power lines, you know, across the canyons in the national forest. And now when I see power lines, I see hazard. That is how it is for us. We have 8 million trees within strike distance of our lines in our high fire threat areas. We can't and shouldn't want to remove all those trees. And so for us, it's a true reimagination of this grid to both prevent wildfire and decarbonize. And I think that actually puts us in this amazing position to tap into providing energy sources where they're used, these big bulk power stations. Just to give a little bit of context, those electric vehicles on the road have 6,700 megawatts of capacity in my service area on the road that is untapped as an energy resource. It's just an energy draw. Imagine when we can utilize one of those electric vehicles to power a home through a public safety power shutoff, because we've got to turn off the transmission to protect people from wildfire, but can still power a home with a decarbonized mobility solution. Like, for me, it's like, okay, new game, everybody. This is a new dawn, and we have the privilege and the responsibility to reimagine this grid in a way that has hundreds of years in mind, not this quarter, not this annual financial cycle, but for generations and generations and generations to come. Just like its early invention, you know, these power lines point to point was the lowest cost way to bring energy to the masses and create prosperity for all. That was true then, but it's a different equation now, and we can live up to that. So I do think there's a big opportunity. And the last point I'll make is on the distributed energy future. I think it's been too contentious. I think we find ourselves in this sort of fixed pie mindset of winners and losers. If you win, I lose. And I have to tell you, some of the best news I received after taking this job was that Mary Powell was coming to California. And so I'm very excited about that. And she and I have already connected, and I just sense a new environment of collaboration and partnerships, because no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And we have a role to play, but there's so much room to reimagine this energy system together that I think the business model does need to mature with the environment, but I don't see it as a heavy lift. And I personally think what Green Mountain Power has done is a perfect role model for the world, and mighty indeed is what I have to say about the Green Mountain Power business model. And we look forward to evolving here at PG&E.
Thanks, Patty. Well, so if anyone's listening and does not know who Mary Powell is, Mary Powell was the CEO of Green Mountain Power before Mary Mcclure. And Mary has recently taken on the role of CEO at Sunrun. And Patty, I love that you brought her up, because you and Mary are the two people I know, two CEOs I know that actually live the leading with love philosophy. So I know the two of you have that in common. Deborah, let's turn to you. And actually, I'd love if you could add into your thoughts on this topic about DR aggregation, demand flexibility, also add in energy efficiency, right? Pacific Northwest for a long time has been known for the advances and how much it's embraced energy efficiency. So add that in, some thoughts about that to your answer as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one of the things that brought me to Seattle and that made the job so attractive was that I had grown up in the industry working at the Eugene Water and Electric Board, who was very, for a smallish utility, very, very forward-looking and thinking in terms of energy efficiency. And so coming to Seattle, and I had another stop along the way, but coming to Seattle felt like home, because a lot of what we did at EWEB, we had learned from Seattle City Lights. So some folks think of us as the grandfather of energy efficiency. And I saw a question earlier in the chat as I was scrolling up and down. Well, how do you deal with the inherent tension between basically, the reality is energy efficiency involves paying our customers to use less of our product. And, for most people who operate as CEOs or managers of any other business, that would seem kind of crazy. But what we knew, 25, 35 years ago, when energy efficiency was just getting started, was we knew that the power plant you don't build is the most cost-effective resource. And the struggle, of course, is that that's not always true on an individual utility basis. So you've got the forest and the trees, and for the forest, that's always true. I think we all agree on that. For the tree, it can be challenging. And so Seattle is a city where, as we have embraced technology as one of some of our largest employers, and Seattle kind of has a reputation for being tech town with Amazon and others that are here. And there's been a lot of infill development, which means taking down old stuff and putting in new buildings that are extremely efficient. And really built differently. And we are all about supporting and working with partners on zero emission buildings, where we're helping, especially from an equity perspective, working with affordable housing providers and others to have some of the infrastructure that is the most energy efficiency, that are smart buildings that really provide a quality of life and affordability that customers who otherwise are typically lower income, well, obviously if they're in affordable housing, some of them have come off of the street, and they really need to not have to think about some of those things, and yet they lead with what can they afford. So we continue to see energy efficiency as a huge part of that model, although I will also say that like most of us who have really engaged and embraced that work, the megawatts that we are purchasing today are more expensive than the ones that we purchased in the past. And that is also part of the model, is that as appliances and other things, I was talking to someone this morning at my breakfast meeting who said that one of the agencies that that provide certifications on, smart homes, et cetera, is no longer going to provide 5-star ratings for appliances that are gas-based, because even though they may be efficient, they are carbon-based, and don't see that as part of the future that we're all working together to try and create. So I guess just a couple of things. I think that I love the leading with love as well. And I have to say, from a culture perspective, that is a challenge, and it's a challenge in our industry. But FYI, I mean, Lyman, part of the challenge is that we tend to think of utilities, especially as managers, we think of the engineer, the Patty, a lot of engineers in the world, which I'm not. But most of our operations folks, they're hands-on people. They touch and feel things. That's how they know what they're doing. They're incredibly heartfelt people, and I don't think we recognize that a lot. So I do also say to my people that every employee has a right to a supervisor that cares about them, and that's part of how we choose our supervisors. But culturally, for City Light, we are really focused on equity, partnerships, and integrated planning. So I want to go back to, close where you asked me to start, which is that those things are all related. We have our first microgrid that's up with battery storage, and we're using it for what we hope to duplicate over the city for all of our emergency service centers, because we know that in the case of an issue, most of our customers, or many of our customers, that's where they're going to go. And we have, when we learned this summer, we have an extremely low air conditioning percentage here in our community. So we have to be mindful of not just cold weather events, but even though we are a winter peaking utility, climate change is changing that. And so we have hot weather events that we also have to protect our customers and our communities from. And then I just want to say that I am all in. I love vehicle to grid. I think about school buses all the time as, an amazing power plant, because they really, essentially, they're only in use a couple times a day. And the times when we need the most, when we rely on our system in those shoulder hours, typically those buses are sitting in a lot somewhere. And I know that's something, I saw somebody on the question from Proterra, and I know that that's a model that Proterra has been successful with in many cases. I also think about hot water heaters. So the point is that when we think about batteries, we tend to think of a lithium ion battery. And certainly when we think about battery to scale, although again, DOE is putting a lot of focus on hydrogen to scale as the form that is available in the future. But when we think of batteries to scale, we think about these large lithium ion batteries, which have a huge purpose. And I think, the technology is right there, but we also have a lot of batteries, natural batteries in our system. And as we rebuild the grid and we make our grid smarter, more reactive, and faster, I said we have the opportunity to do amazing stuff just using what we already have.
So I cannot believe we only have 10 minutes left, because I have my list of things I want to talk about just keeps getting longer as I'm listening to each of you. So I'm trying to prioritize. I have my notebook. I'm trying to prioritize. It's very hard. But
Julia, I think you can just stop with what Patty and Deborah said. Like, all right.
Well, I want to sort of pick up where you left off, though, Deborah, and also this is pulling in a theme I'm also seeing from the questions from the audience. A lot of people who are listening in work for technology companies, in some cases startups, in some cases well-established, longstanding partners with the utility industry. But I'm definitely seeing a lot of questions about, like, how can tech companies most effectively help utilities with their carbon reduction journey? How can they best partner with you? What do you need to see them doing differently or more of? And talk to those people in the audience who work for the technology companies, because I think we all know that utilities are going to need partnerships in a far more meaningful way than they have ever needed in the past in order for us to all achieve this common goal.
Well, I can just say a couple of things and then turn it over to my colleagues. I would say work with us. So I think Patty made the comment about competition, and I used to try and get my employees' attention by saying, and I'm sure all of us on this call have done a similar thing. Who's our competitor? And people will say, oh, no one. Well, no, actually in Seattle proper, I would say Amazon is a competitor, because I think customers, and we've talked about this, but the utility customer of today is very, very different than the one from when I started in this industry 25 years ago. Customers want choice, and we all recognize that. And they want what they want when they want it. They want local control. And, there used to be a time when public power, which I am, where we thought, well, we have local control. Well, we have learned, and I think California is an amazing place when you look at the community choice aggregators, that customers will find a way to have their wants and needs be out there and be met, whether we provide it or not. So the key is for us to be there. And then customers want all green all the time. Now, that's not true across the country. Or it is true, I think, increasingly, but there is a cost impact that needs to be managed against the speed with which we get there. But the point is that we need to be responsive to our customers as an old time industry that for a lot of years was fairly stagnant. Well, there's nothing stagnant about what's happening today. So for tech companies, work with us, and we're doing so. One of the coolest things, I don't know if anybody saw this, but we had the first hockey game of the new Seattle NHL franchise team. This Patty and I talked about this on a prior call, but it's in Climate Pledge Arena, which is the first fully, there's a little bit of work left to do, but it will be the first zero-based really large facility in the world, sports arena. And so, that is work that's coming from support from tech here. I mean, that is a community project where everybody worked together, including the city, to create this thing. So I think as we move forward and we look, and a lot of the projects that we're doing right now, we are working collaboratively with the port, with ferries, with cruise ship industry, and we are working with our technology partners across the city, because I think of the grid, and apologies for the oversimplification of this, but I often use the analogy that the grid is my smartphone, and my in-laws who are in their 90s, they still use a flip phone, a Motorola flip phone. And if my grid is the flip phone, there's not a lot we can do. But if I can upgrade my phone, others will create the apps that we need to wind up with really smart cities, where the technology and the confluence between energy and technology truly make our lives better and easier, not just keep us warm. I mean, right now, I like to think about, what do I do for a living? I keep people warm and comfortable. I'd like to be able to say that what I do for a living is to make people's lives work better. And I think that is the next evolution, and it's where we're going.
You're on mute, Julia.
Darn it, I almost got through a whole webinar without doing it. I was just adding, if Patty or Mary, either of you had anything to add on this question of how can tech companies work even more collaboratively with you as utilities?
Well, I do think part of that is on us as the utilities. What I know that we can be hard to work with, and maybe I won't speak for my friends here on the panel, but in my experience, a great big company has sometimes a hard time creating channels for innovation intake. And sometimes an entrepreneur has a great idea or a technology solution, think of it like a hammer, and they're looking around for a nail. When I don't think, and one of the things that we're working on, we're actually creating an innovation intake team who can scan the marketplace more actively, but also be more communicative about what our biggest challenges are. I think we're afraid to say we need help on this or we need help on that. And so we don't create forums to say, here's our 5 biggest problems, and support the potential solutions to them. What I've heard from innovators, and I've done a little bit of work here in Silicon Valley in particular, but with our university partners, what's your experience been like? And what I hear is death by 1,000 pilots. We expect these tech companies to live with our regulatory cycle, which can be very long and onerous, and they've come and gone by the time we get an approval. So we've got to make it easier. And I think there are means and vehicles to do that. And that's what we're excited about, creating an intake mechanism.
Great. Well, we have 4 minutes left. You're all very busy women CEOs. I'm sure you probably all have something lined up right behind this. So I want to be respectful of your time. And I apologize. We have so many great questions from the audience that we've not been able to get to. But I hope everybody will remain engaged through SEPA and have opportunities for engagement with these leaders and others on a regular basis. But I can't end this webinar without asking a question, you know, specific in terms of your advice to other women who are looking to take on leadership roles in the energy industry. What's one piece of advice you each have to those women who are up and coming and looking to take on greater roles of responsibility? Mary, let's start with you.
Sure. This is always a hard question because I have this like contradiction that happens in me where I'm like, are we really still talking about this? Like, and then, but then I like see the stats and I'm like, of course we have like, oh my gosh, we definitely still need to be talking about this very loudly. So I guess my one piece of advice is stay in the game. I know that like throughout the course of my career, not only as a woman in a male dominated industry, but also as a gay woman in a heterosexual dominated world, that things didn't always feel like fair, you know, or like I felt different or like I didn't belong. And there were all these moments in my career where I could have gone somewhere more comfortable and not be vulnerable or, you know, get out of the space in which I felt like I didn't belong. And I'm so glad, and it still happens to me, by the way, I still find myself in those spaces. I'm generally so glad that I've stayed because I've had people in my life notice that, and we need women representing. I mean, just think about what the women on this panel have been able to accomplish and what you've been able to accomplish, Julia. Like, this is what we need. And we need to continue to see it. And you need to be authentically who you are and stay in the freaking game. So I think that's my advice. I'm an old athlete too, so I'm not anymore, but I am now. I just encourage everybody to stay in even when you feel like you don't belong.
That is amazing advice. Patty, how about you?
Well, ditto, Mary, great advice. Just very, you know, succinctly, I would say, believe in yourself. And so it builds on Mary's comments. Just if you believe in you, then others will too. That's it. So when you walk in a room and you realize you're the only one and you feel like, oh gosh, maybe I don't belong, you need to stop that thought and just remind yourself, I do belong. They need me. And you believe in you. Next thing you know, they'll be listening. That confidence is contagious and definitely highly attractive to others. So you believe in you.
Awesome. Deborah, last word, piece of advice for other women out there.
Yeah, so, and I usually give this piece of advice regardless for men or women, but it says, you know, we invest in ourselves in different ways. You know, advanced degrees are a form of investment. I always wish that I had gone back and gotten my MBA. I don't have that. And that's the one thing in my life that I feel that I sometimes regret. But what I do have is all along the way in my career, I took any opportunity to learn something new. I didn't worry about whether I was going to get a raise. I didn't worry about the title. I thought, you know what, if I have an opportunity to learn something new, even if it is the same amount of money and I'm working extra hard, I am investing in myself. And I think that is what's happened. I think that we have learned over recent years that, you know, authentic leadership is incredibly important. Knowing what your personal values are so you can understand if you align with the organization is also super important. But the most important thing is generalism. I mean, I honestly think to lead at this level, we either started as generalists or we had to become them. And so there are paths along the way that allow you to just be exposed to all kinds of things and take them. And I don't think you'll ever regret that.
Well, thank you all so much. I'm so inspired. I've always been inspired. I have so much respect for all three of you. So thank you for sharing your knowledge, experience, and wisdom with this great audience that we've got here today. And keep doing what you're doing. This industry needs you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.